Planning Review Committee held today, Tuesday the 21st of February. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will be live streamed. First of all, ask for any apologies, but I can see that everybody is in attendance, and just for that sake, I'm going to ask everybody to say exactly who they are.
So the Councillor Alf Kelly.
Councillor James Kerr. Provost Robert Bissett, I'm the councillor for the Falkirk North Ward.
Councillor Ian Sinclair, Falkirk North Ward.
Emma MacArthur, Committee Officer.
Jack Frawley, Team Leader, Health Services.
Douglas Flack, Team Leader, Legal Services.
Brent Vivian, Senior Planning Officer, Development Services.
John Milne, Senior Planning Officer, Development Services.
Okay, thank you. That's everybody that's in attendance this morning. First of all, item 2 on your agenda is declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time?
No.
No, none submitted, that's fine. That takes us to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the Planning Review Committee held on the 18th of March 2022. It's pages 3 to 9. Any questions arising for that minute? If not, then I'm quite happy to move the minute. Agreed? Agreed? Agreed the minute. Fine, thank you. That takes us on to a very important aspect to this meeting. It's Planning Review Committee procedures. And for this, I will ask Douglas Blythe, our legal advisor, to make Douglas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Convener. I'll try and be as brief as I can. As you know, this is the Planning Review Committee convened to review planning decisions taken by officers under the scheme of delegation. As is their right, applicants are allowed to review those decisions if they're unhappy with the officer's decision. The papers are before the members today, and I think, as always, the first objective is to assess the papers and see whether there's sufficient information there or whether any further procedure is required. And again, as you know, there are strict procedures set down in the regulations, namely potential for further written representations, site visits, either accompanied or unaccompanied, or a hearing. Now, as with any planning decision, a planning review is based on an assessment of the applicable policies, an assessment of the development plan, and decisions should be taken in accordance with that unless material considerations suggest otherwise. Now, members will be aware that we've had recent introduction of MPF4, which is really just at the start of last week, and that's going to have a significant impact on assessment of applications, both going forward and those which are subject to review. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague John Milne, who's going to go into the MPF4 considerations so that members are aware of that before they decide on what procedure is necessary today. That's good.
Mr. Milne, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Members will be aware that as of Monday the 13th of February 2023, National Planning Framework 4, NPF4, now forms part of the Statutory Development Plan. NPF4 has superseded National Planning Framework 3 and Scottish Planning Policy, SPP 2014. For the purposes of this review committee, this means that additional new policies may require to be considered apart from those previously considered in the report and handling of the planning applications. While each planning application is different and the policies of NPF4 may or may not be considered applicable, Section 25 of the 1997 Act requires that decisions are made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. application of planning judgment to the circumstances of an individual situation remains essential to all decision-making informed by principles of proportionality and reasonableness. The Scottish Government recognises that it may take some time for planning authorities and stakeholders to get to grips with NPF 4 policies, in particular the interface with individual local development plan policies. In the event of any incompatibility between the provision of NPF 4 and the LDP, whichever of them is later in date will prevail. With this in mind, it is respectfully recommended that the applicant be afforded the opportunity to submit comments where considered appropriate on the emerging NPF 4 policies as they relate to the application being considered by the Planning Review Committee prior to any decision being taken today. The planning advisor or representative may also intimate perceived relevance of any emerging policies. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for that, Mr. Milne. I'm going to go back to Mr. Blythe, the legal advisor, to give members an update and advice that's forthcoming from officers in relation to this morning's meeting. Mr. Blythe.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's regrettable that perhaps we aren't in a position to take a decision today, but I think the emerging establishment of NPF 4 as the new development plan framework does render it incumbent upon the committee to take all relevant information into account. I think for that reason it's sensible to allow the applicant and indeed the planning authority to assess the applications in the light of that further information coming forward. It's hard to say at this stage what policies may be relevant and indeed whether any policies will be relevant, but I think it would render the decision, any decision that was made, more logically thought through if those policies in NPF 4 were assessed and representations received. Now, that would be done by way of written submission, and we would approach the applicant and the planning authority to afford them the opportunity, probably with 14 days, a timescale of 14 days. Once those were received, the same comments would be exchanged between the applicant and the planning authority, with another 14 days for those comments to be responded to. At that point, we would be able to collate those comments and bring them back before the committee. That's notwithstanding any other procedure that the committee might want to decide on today. I'm thinking site visits, perhaps, if that's the committee are like.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Blythe. I think it's important to say at this stage that the members, all members of the council, are still waiting on some sort of feedback in relation to training for NPF 4. So we can understand, but I'm going to go right to the members of the committee. You've heard Mr. Blythe, you've heard Mr. Millen. The advice for officers is that we continue these until this further information is received. How does members feel about that?
Happy to take the advice.
I think so. I think it wouldn't. I mean, imagine if we went ahead and made decisions and later on it could be challenged because of the NPF 4 regulations that may come forward. So I would agree with officers to continue.
Councillor Sinclair?
I mean, I think the position that we're in is quite regrettable, which is exactly what Mr. Blythe said. It's important for us to be aware of all the information that's relevant to the decisions that we're taking. Are we just out of interest? Are we waiting on further information coming from NPF 4? Or are we waiting on further guidance, or is that still in relation to that?
I'll bring Mr. Milne in on that question.
Thank you, Convener. NPF 4 has been issued, so the policies are established. what we are in the process of doing as an authority and as other authorities are doing is comparing the policies of NPF4 with our own local development plan policies to see whether they tie in or whether there's any degree of conflict within those policies. So it's a comparison exercise that we're undertaking and a review that we're undertaking just now. Obviously, we're happy to do with all this with all applications, not just applications in front of the board today. So it's a process that's been undertaken by colleagues in our policy team, and which we hope to agree consensus and be able to advise the members in due course about the relevance of NPF4 policies and LDP policies.
Thanks, Computer.
Councillor Kerr.
Like Councillor Sinclair, very regrettable. Spent all weekend reading through the reports, which wasn't the greatest weekend to have. But as Ian says, it's regrettable that, and it's understandable why we're doing it. I've got a couple of questions regarding it, if I can ask the questions.
Yes, indeed.
So Douglas mentioned about the latest, I don't know if it was Douglas or John, mentioned that the latest planning guidance will supersede anything else. So does that mean our LDP 2, is that no longer in use anymore? Or is that the stage we're at the moment to see if both of them collate together? John?
Mr. Millen?
Yeah. Apologies on that. I'm not a planning policy officer. But my understanding is that the policies of FLDP2 are still relevant. They've been augmented by NPF4. So what we do is, as a sort of umbrella approach, a kind of hierarchy approach, NPF4 will now establish the policies. We will then have to review our local development plan policies to see whether they tie in with NPF4 or whether there's any degree of conflict. So both are still relevant. In previous cases, members have simply looked at FLDP2 policies. Now we've got two sets of policies to look at, unfortunately. We've got the national policy under NPF4 and then the LDP policy under our Falkirk local development plan. And we have to make a judgment as to whether or not the policies tie in on each particular application, or where there is perhaps conflict, what that conflict might be.
And one more question, if your indulgence, convener. If there is evidence comes for NPF4 that supports any of these applications, will the decision of the officer change, or will it still be what it is now?
Good point.
I think the opportunity is that we're obviously in a de novo approach anyway with our review board. And we won't really change the report of handling as it was issued at the time, because any planning decision is a snapshot in time. What we're seeing just now, unfortunately, in layperson's terms, is the goalposts have moved.
Yeah.
From when the decision was taken by officers under the FLD policies alone, the goalposts have moved now, and that we now have supplementary guidance. As officers, obviously, at this board, we won't make recommendation on the application. We'll simply appraise members of what the relevant policies are, and it then would be up to members to weigh those policies to see whether or not they come to a contrary decision from the previous issued refusal notice.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Well, so it's not a spoilt day. I would propose that we go to sites.
Well, I'm just going to come on to that. I'd like to thank our officers here for explaining. I think we realise that we're all going to need some training on this, and I think we're disappointed, obviously, that they can't carry out the business today. But the fact is, I think that the applicants will be really, really disappointed because they've been waiting such a long time. I think the last time that we had an LRB, I think was last year. But the fact is, we are where we are, and as Councillor Kerr says, and to ensure that it's not a wasted day, the part of the process is going out sites. I would move formally with Councillor Kerr that we go out and site this morning, unaccompanied site visit, and view these sites, and that then would firm us up for when these come back to committee. As members agree to that? Councillor Sinclair?
Yeah,
Okay with that?
that's about the committee, it's about the committee.
Okay. Okay then, fine, thank you. I think we've got a bus ready for, I think it's 10:30. I think we've got an opportunity to go. And just to say that we'll not come back, once we did the unaccompanied site visits, we'll not be back into here to reconvene. That will be it until we get work that all the information is back, and then the meeting is reset. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you.